Welcome back to Clutch Time. This is your host, Rico. Today, we're going to be looking at the SWBA trade deadline, and we're going to be talking about a couple teams that I think could maybe make a big splash as this Thursday trade deadline comes up. We're also going to be looking at a team here in SimWorld U that I think is going to be on the rise here as this season goes along. And so let's go ahead and jump into it, starting with the SWBA trade deadline. And so, look, I think that we're still really shocked with what we saw here on Saturday night when we see the Lakers make this deal, which sent Luka over to the Lakers, and then you get Anthony Davis heading to the Mavs. I think that was a complete shocker there. And then when we look at just this last recent trade that sent Zach LaVine over to the Sacramento Kings, you have De'Aaron Fox heading over to his preferred destination, the San Antonio Spurs. And so I think that is huge to see. The Bulls finally probably pick a path with their rebuild, and more importantly, they get control back over their first round picks. I think that's something that has been really talked about throughout this season, because we knew that if they fell, I think, out of the top 10, then that pick was going to go over to the San Antonio Spurs. And if it did not convey this year, it was going to be tougher the next year, because it was going to be, I think, a top 8 protected pick. And so I think the Bulls get out of that. They now have a direction with, I think a rebuild here. What are they going to do with it? We'll see. But more importantly, they get their picks back. And so, with that being said, now we're looking at some teams that I think still are going to really make a splash here. And I think the obvious is going to be the Golden State Warriors. I do think that the Golden State Warriors are going to make a deal, especially after you hear Steve Kerr say that, look, we can't stay pat. Like, we cannot stay the same here at this point in time. I think that they really sense the urgency. You can see it in Steph Curry's face in these interviews that he's a competitor. He wants to win. He's won at an elite level before, and they want to maximize this time. And it's a tough situation, I think. And maybe I think a lot is really not talked about there with Golden State and the pressure, because when you look at Steph Curry play, you'll notice he has a hand wrap on his hand. I think he's dealing with a hand injury. From what I understand, some of these sources saying as well that he's been dealing with a little bit of a knee issue as well. We know that Draymond Green has been out, I think, with a calf injury as of late. And so they've dealt with some injuries. They tried to really go and use, a lot of players on the roster here. And, it's getting to the point where you're having to go with a second round center in Quentin Post. And so I just think that, yes, the Golden State Warriors are going to make a move. But I think the real question here is, for this to happen, and we'll talk about the Jimmy Butler situation in a moment, I think that the Golden State Warriors are going to have to ask themselves, what are they willing to give up? Because, some of the things that I'm seeing here is that maybe the Golden State Warriors, and understandably so, they are reluctant to give up, I think, some of these players that have some championship DNA. What do you mean by that? And so Andrew Wiggins, he is a player that has helped you get to the top of the mountain, so to speak. You won a title with him. You have Kayvon Looney. He is another player that has helped you as well. And then Gary Payton II is another player that you have traded for from Portland to bring back. We know what he brings defensively to this team. He has helped win titles as well. And so I just think, their motto, the strength in numbers, they really do buy into the championship DNA, which I really do believe helps a team. And I think it's the bottom line. Like, I don't care who you have got to have players that, have been in tough situations and have come out on top. And so when you trade away some of these players, you're certainly going to change the chemistry here. And that is something that the Golden State Warriors have to wonder. If we're going to leverage some of our championship window here for some players back that don't necessarily fit, you have to think twice about that. And if you know that they're not going to be a part of your future long-term, that's going to be interesting, because like I said before, when we talk about Andrew Wiggins, he's a player that has been mentioned in some of these trade talks. We've seen that perhaps him, Jonathan Kuminga, these are players that were mentioned, but the Golden State Warriors may not be as reluctant to trade them because they just feel like that's too much of a haul to get a guy like a Jimmy Butler, somebody now that we know does not want to sign an extension with you. And I get that, because if you move off of that championship DNA, you bring over a player that, yes, he's been to the championship stage, but he hasn't walked off with the trophy. I think that that's a bit of a disaster here. And for Golden State, I think not only do they want to make a trade that maximizes this window, but I think that they're looking for something that maybe bridges the gap a little bit. And I think that maybe that's why you see that they're a little hesitant here, maybe on a player like Vooch, even though I think financially it probably works out here. Here's a player he's set to make 20 million this year, 21 and some change next season. And so essentially you're getting an expiring contract. I get that he started off hot and then he's kind of tapered off a little bit here. But I think that with the deal for a player like Vooch, and that's a player that I think that they could still go out and get, and I think could still probably help them. Maybe there's something else that they maybe can get done along with that. But when you bring in a player like that, it's a short-term window. I think that maybe they can make a deal here, not necessarily give up a lot of draft capital over to give Vooch. I mean, they just, the Bulls, I'm talking about them, they just made a trade in which they didn't net a first-round pick. They've already traded now Levine. They traded also DeMar DeRozan, Alex Caruso. They haven't netted a first-round pick. And so maybe that's something where the Golden State Warriors perhaps maybe get into a negotiation with the Chicago Bulls. And maybe they don't have to necessarily give up a lot of draft capital here. We'll see what happens. But I would say that that's a player that could be moved to the Golden State Warriors. And we know as well that they're still looking at some of these all-stars around the league as well. Like they've looked back at the Paul George situation. I'm seeing that maybe Kevin Durant. I'm seeing, maybe they've even explored looking at LeBron James. But either way, I would expect for the Golden State Warriors to absolutely make something happen here at the trade deadline. And I just think that they are going to have to look themselves in the mirror and just ask themselves, what are they willing to give up to move forward? Because you have to give something up in order to get something that is going to maybe push open this window a little bit longer. So definitely a team that I think is going to make a move. Lastly, another team that I think is going to make a move here is going to be the Los Angeles Lakers. I don't think that they are done. And this is something that, just kind of pondering what they have on the roster. They didn't give up anything for Luka, and they still have Hachimura on the roster at $17 million for 2 years there. You still have Austin Reeves on the roster. They still have Dalton Connect on the roster. And so they still have some pieces, young pieces that maybe they're willing to part ways with just for this maybe short window of time. If they're thinking more of a LeBron James play and they want to maximize that, they can make some moves. And I think that for them, they could go out and maybe get a center back like Jonas Valanciunas. I think that maybe Robert Williams III, from Portland, maybe he's a player that could be had in a deal. And even I'm throwing out a player that I think a lot of people haven't talked about, and I know his contract is a little bit more hefty, but maybe DeAndre Ayton. All right. And I'm saying that because Portland, they have an abundance of centers. They have Aiden, they have Donovan Clegan, and they have Robert Williams III. And so I think that maybe one of those centers could be had in a trade. And so we know that the Lakers need that. They could possibly pivot this way, even though I think maybe what they might be doing is just trying to get rid of some of the salary that they don't want in a Jared Vanderbilt or a Gabe Vincent. So I think definitely these two teams are teams that I'm looking for to just seeing make a splash. And lastly, I'm going to throw a surprise team out there, the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have been linked to that Phoenix Suns deal, which would possibly get Jimmy Butler over to the Phoenix Suns. And I'm not sure if they're looking to be a facilitator, but they would need to move Pat Covington. That is going to essentially get them under an apron, and then they would be able to maybe make a move. Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, those are players that I could expect could be on the move, and so be looking for these teams. And so next up, I wanted to talk quickly about a team here in SimWorld U that I look, I'm glad that Nova finally got its respect, and they are at number 3. I thought that, they've had a fabulous season thus far. I've loved just how they've operated as a team. But one team that I think is on the watch that we should start to look at is UCLA. I think that UCLA is a team with Mick Cronin. I think that this team can do some damage. And I know probably a lot of people aren't, maybe too excited to hear that. They're currently 17th. They don't have, necessarily the greatest record at 11-7. But, man, this team is tough. And can we talk about the fact that they have two players that I think are just outstanding? And I think that they really play off of each other. When you talk about LeGerald Carroll and then also to Jalen Snow, I think that they both complement each other very well, because with Carroll, he's a little bit more of a defensive player. And then I know that Jalen Snow struggles at times defensively, but both of them can absolutely score the basketball. And I think that that has really been key for what UCLA has been able to do. And I just think that this is a team. Nobody is necessarily talking about just how good this duo is, but more importantly, nobody is talking about the fact that, and I'm going to say this, and this is probably going to be a wild take, but they have had some quality losses. Yes, that's right, quality losses. I think that they've had some losses that are absolutely going to help this team down the stretch, because can we look at the fact that they have lost to Kentucky, they've lost to Duke, and those have been some tight basketball games. Both of those teams have been number one, and they've been right there with the big dogs. And that was earlier in the season in October and in November, because against Kentucky, they lost 89-82 in that game. And then they came back. They only get beat by 10 against Duke, 95-85. I know a lot of people may say, hey, you don't get anything from losses. I do not agree with that. I have said this before, even on the broadcast that I have done, that the bottom line here is that, look, you have to learn how to lose in order to win sometimes. And I think that this team absolutely is in that position. I think that they're in the driver's seat to do so. And, shout out to B-Ron here. Helped me get a hold here of Jalen Snow. I got a chance to just talk to him briefly after his USC, after they beat USC, I believe. And he was saying that I was like, what is it with these losses? How has that really helped you as a team? And he said, look, I think these losses against top-ranked teams have really shown us where we need to improve. Just paraphrasing this a little bit, we faced some tough competition. And he said, look, while we didn't come out on top, they've exposed our weaknesses, and they've shown us what we've had to work on, what we've had to practice on, whether it's defense, ball movement, closing out games. I really feel like this has built our mental toughness, and I love that. This is a team that we need to really start to look for. I don't care where they are right now. It's not where you start. It's how you finish. You can let me know what you think about UCLA, because I think that they absolutely are a team that we should start to watch for. So anyway, this is clutch time. Make sure that you go ahead, you press that like, you press that subscribe button. Matter of fact, you slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like my man Sherwood did last night on CKC in the Maryland Terps last night. And so I'm just throwing some shade out of there. But anyway, clutch time, man. Make sure you press that like, subscribe button. And as we always say, see the game, be the game. I'll see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.